Today on the show, you are capable of so much more than people say you are. And we know this because of Bill Belichick. Plus, dwarf tossing, still part of our political process.
Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
So, because it's 2019 and because all bets are off and because the world is, what's the expression I'm looking for? Oh, yeah, freaking nuts! This is part of our news cycle and part of our political process. Dwarf tossing is back in the news. It is a hotly debated topic. Last week, we talked about Trump's nominee to replace Kavanaugh on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, Naomi Rao, pardon me if I'm not pronouncing the name right, being attacked by the media for her support allowing grown-ups to make money doing this thing called dwarf tossing. Now, more on that in a little bit, but I want to tell you a story of how I ended up on the radio. You and I have talked about this a bit in the past, but when I was a kid, I was in this band. I was supposed to go to college. I had a scholarship to Tufts University and New England Conservatory of Music. And much to the chagrin and disappointment of my parents, I bailed on that because this sort of screaming punk rock rap metal band I was in got a record deal. And as you and I have discussed in the past, you offer a teenage boy a choice between a dorm room and a tour bus. He's going to take the tour bus every single time. So I did. And I had a great old time for the next, I don't know, till I was like 22, 23, next 7 years or so. And when that was over and done with, I needed to figure out what was next in life. I was in a tough spot because all my other friends that I'd gone to high school with, the ones who had been so envious of my ability to spend my life on the road and collect a paycheck, screaming and yelling every single night and put out records and whatnot, they were all graduating. They were all getting real jobs. They were all buying their own cars. They all had rent and mortgages and things of that nature. This was right as one giant company swallowed up my record deal and decided, we're going to put this whole thing on hold for a long time. The guitar player in my band, he was older, he had a wife, he had a kid. He was offered a job being the musical director of the Blue Man Group, and off he went to do that. So I'm stood there going, alack a day, forsooth, oh, woe is me, what am I to do? My resume says lead singer in a band, and I don't even have a band. I was told to bring the tour bus back, and I needed a paycheck. I needed a way to make a living. I needed a way to sustain myself. And I didn't know what that was going to be. So what did I do? I decided that even though I didn't really have a home, New York City had sort of been it. I would spend most of my life on tour and then sort of come and crash in New York City. But I decided I would move from the closest thing I had to a home, New York City, to Houston, Texas. Why? Well, a couple different reasons. I thought that I would be able to make something of myself in Houston, Texas, because Houston is an incredibly media-driven town. First and foremost, when I hit the road, I got to tell you, I loved Texas. I loved everything about it. I especially loved Houston. One of my best friends that I went to school with in England when I was growing up, he lived in Houston. So there was that. But also, it's funny when you consider the fact that a person grew up back and forth between London and New York City. The last place on earth you would expect for them to feel at home would be Texas. It's just so completely different. In fact, when I was thinking of going to college, when I was thinking of going to Tufts and New England Conservatory of Music, a big part of the appeal was the fact that Boston, it was sort of like a good mix of New York and London. It seemed like a place where I could get along. It seemed like a place that wouldn't offend my cosmopolitan sensibilities. But Texas was very different from anything I'd ever experienced before. But in a wonderful way. People were awesome. People were welcoming. People were cool, kind. If you had the ability to do something, if you had a skill to offer, if you had something that would add value to a town that they were in, they were very receptive to it. And so for that reason, I decided the people were cool, the cost of living was low, and I was going to make my name in Texas, post being in a band. Texas also has the advantage, Houston specifically, also has the advantage of being very media driven. And that was all I really understood outside of writing songs and playing them live. I kind of got media. I kind of got tour marketing. I kind of understood the nature of driving traffic with media. In New York City, there wasn't a ton of that. First and foremost, there was one of me on every corner. Some guy that used to be in a band looking for a job at a record label or a TV station or a radio station or something like that. There were too many of me. There's too much competition. But also, media wasn't as big of a thing in New York. But I mean, obviously, media market number one is New York City. But it was a little different because there's a lot of foot traffic in New York. This is sort of the science. This is sort of the science of media and how you make a living off of it a little bit. There wasn't a ton of, there was all this foot traffic in New York. In New York City, you could just walk down the street, smell pizza, and decide to go into that pizza restaurant because it smelled good. Very different in Houston. In Houston, you weren't going to a restaurant unless you had a coupon or a 2-for-1 for it, or unless you saw a commercial for it on TV or heard one on the radio. It was a very media-driven town because it was such a car culture and there's no walk-in traffic. So I figured I had a reasonably decent shot. But I had nothing. I had no leads, no idea of where to begin. I knew that I wanted to do something in media. I knew that maybe radio is something that I would like to do. But I mean, that was an unbelievable pipe dream. No one was going to hire me to be on the radio. I didn't have a resume. I didn't have what we call in the radio business an air check. It just wasn't going to happen. So I got to Houston and I decided I would figure it out as I go. But in the meantime, I hooked up with that friend of mine, the one that I went to school with, who was at the time having a very successful run being a waiter. And he was like, dude, just come in. I'll get you a job as a waiter. It's going to be great. I was like, waiter? How much money can you make being a waiter? And he told me how much money he was making, and I was shocked. I was aghast. It was more money than I was making when I had a major label record deal. I was like, that's how much you're taking home? He's like, yeah, it's great. Just do that. I'll get you a job, no problem. You'll be fine. And even if it's not what you want to do with your life, even if you don't want to work in the restaurant business or catering, or, you'll be able to do it until you find whatever it is you're looking for. I was like, gosh, that's so nice. And he really painted a really nice picture of what it was like to be a server of food and work in restaurants. He really made it sound great. And so off I went. I did a job interview, got myself a job as a waiter at a restaurant, and I was waiting for, the wonderfulness that my friend had described to kick in. But as it turns out, my experience was very different to his. And it was a rude awakening for me when I discovered things that, we'll get into next.
Real radio. 104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So I moved to Houston, Texas from New York. Had grown up in London, lived in New York when I wasn't in a band on tour, and I wound up in Houston, Texas for a couple different reasons. First and foremost, I had one of my best friends, a guy who is still one of my best friends, that lived there. Second of all, cost of living way lower than New York City. Third of all, it was a very media-driven town. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was a guy who was like 23 years old. My resume said lead singer in a band. I didn't have a band anymore. And my only real professional experience was media-related. And I knew that Houston was a very media-driven town. So off I went to the great state of Texas. And by the way, a big part of the reason why I went to the great state of Texas is because every time on tour that I was there, I had the best time. People were so cool. People were so welcoming. People were so kind. People were so different from anyone that I'd ever met before in my life. Just really awesome in a unique way. And so headed off to the 713 from the 212 and wound up having a really good time. but stumbled a little bit with my choice of employment because my friend, who was at the time a career waiter, told me, just be a waiter till you figure it out, or you might just decide you like doing this. I was like, yeah, but how much money can I make as a server? And he told me how much money he was making, and I was shocked. I was blown away because it was more money than I was making when I was a guy in a band with a major label record deal. I was like, that does sound good. And he's like, yeah, and it's flexible and it's easy going and it's such a cool environment and everybody's chill and laid back and we're having fun. And this is the way he described it to me. He was like, ultimately, people come in, I bring them food, they eat the food, it makes them happy, and they give me money. It's a beautiful thing. And I was like, in the simplest terms, that does sound really good. So my friend helped me and I got a job as a waiter. And here's what was interesting to me. The money this guy made had to do more with volume. He wasn't at a super fancy high-end restaurant. He just, turned a lot of tables. And so I trained. I did a lot of what I would describe as homework. I had to learn this menu inside out. And it was a menu that was very involved. Those salads had a lot of ingredients in them. And I had to know all of them. I had to know allergy stuff. I had to know the details of what was in dressing. I had to know all these sorts of things. And it took studying. I had to make myself flashcards before they ever even let me on the floor of this restaurant. I told my friend about it. I was like, this sucks. He was like, oh, no, man, it's easy. It's just that, just don't worry. Here's a couple of mnemonic devices that'll help you, and you'll be out there making sweet do-re-mi in no time flat. And eventually, after having purchased the clothing that I needed to purchase to work at the restaurant, after having taken the test that I had to pass before being allowed to be a server at this place, I was allowed out on the restaurant floor. And, well, my friend's experience was very different from mine. Like I said, he viewed it in these really beautiful, pure, simplistic terms. And that worked for him. He brought them food. They got happy. They gave him money. He went home with money in his pocket. A lot of it. And I had not enjoyed my experience up until that point. I was like, this is like homework. I wasn't expecting to have to invest all this in a specific type of non-slip shoe and slacks that I have no interest in wearing outside of this ever again. But, at least the cash is going to be good. And once I'm out on the floor, it'll be good times. It was not good times. I just couldn't bring myself to do this stuff with a smile on my face. My friend loved it. My friend, one of the smartest, most intelligent people, one of the most fun-loving people I've ever met, had a great time doing what he was doing. But you know what? I did not. It was not right for me. And not only was I not making money, or not only was it not right for me, I was also failing in rather spectacular form to make any kind of cash. I would work a 12-hour shift, wind up my back aching, and come home with like $35 in my pocket. And he was like, how are you making so little? I was like, I don't know. Maybe I just need a better shift. And he's like, well, how do you feel about the job? I mean, is it fun? I was like, no, it's miserable. I hate it. I hate it so much. And I hate it even more because I'm not making any money doing it. I think I've been doing this for a week and I'm still in the hole. I still have to pay back myself for the shoes that I bought and the slacks that I bought. And I just decided really quick, this might have been great for my friend. It wasn't great for me. And it really wasn't great for me. And I had like a couple of really lousy experiences with some jerk customers. And I felt like it was demeaning. I felt like it was demeaning to take crap from these people that didn't seem to think very much of me, who wanted to nitpick with me about what was or was not in their salad. It was, like I said, soul crushing to me. It was demeaning in that it was demoralizing. I didn't think the work was beneath me. I didn't think it was beneath anyone, but I just didn't have a good time doing it. And I wasn't very good at it, and I wasn't making any money. So it was a soul destroying experience for me. And I know I'm making this sound like a really tough way to go, but I just had a terrible, terrible time doing it. And I'm kind of grateful I had a terrible time doing it, because if I'd gotten comfortable, if I'd gotten in there, if I'd made money, I wouldn't have done what I did 1 week into my waiting career and gone, what the hell, man, I need to get myself a job in radio or something. So I just made myself a demo. I made myself a demo of something that sounded as though I'd been on the radio, even though I'd never been on the radio. And I handed it to everybody I knew. And as it turns out, the program director of the radio station in Houston used to play my old band on the radio, so he knew who I was. That got my foot in the door. And I remember meeting him, and he'd been flooded by, he had his inbox flooded by my demo from so many different sources. Every single person I knew that was even vaguely connected to this radio station, I gave a demo to, said, please give it to this guy. Please give it to this guy. I'm no good as a waiter. I'm no good at anything, but I think I could do this. And when I eventually met my boss-to-be and had that fateful interview, I told him I was either going to get a job or a restraining order. And he was like, you almost got both, but I hear potential here. Let's give you one crappy shift a week and see how you do. So there you have it. That's how I got into radio, because I had a really, really bad time being a waiter. And when I went back to my friend, he was like, man, I'm sorry I gave you a bum steer. I thought you would really enjoy it. I really enjoy it. And he was still years into my radio career making more money than I was as a waiter. I was like, no, man, it just wasn't for me. And he's like, well, now you know. He's like, what didn't you like about it? I was like, well, there's a couple things I didn't like about it. I didn't like that I wasn't making any money. I didn't like that I was on my feet all day. I've got this weird sort of like jacked up thing with my spine. I almost had sort of like scoliosis as a kid, but I was able to sort of do some things with it, certain stretches and whatnot, that helped me avoid having my spine curve in the way it was headed toward curving, but it still resulted in a lot of back pain when I was on my feet for extended periods of time. So I was like, I just didn't care for it. There were too many things about it that didn't work for me. Constant back pain, being on my feet, and ultimately I found it demeaning. And I was surprised to find it demeaning, because you don't seem to find it that way at all. He's like, no, I guess it's just different perspective that we have on the whole thing. And it was demeaning and demoralizing and horrible to me, but it was the right thing for him to be doing at the time, and he had a great time doing it. Which is, well, why I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what's going on with dwarf tossing in America. Because as outlandish as it sounds that this has become part of our political process, there's a very important issue of choice involved here.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
So let's you and I talk about choice and what is or is not demeaning. Now, here's why we got into this. Unbelievably, dwarf tossing has become a significant part of our political discourse in 2019 because, well, as we've said before, it's 2019 and all bets are off. But like I said, dwarf tossing is something that is being addressed. So let's you and I address it, shall we? There's this Republican state senator in Washington state, and they're calling for a statewide ban of dwarf tossing. He says it's, and I quote, an offense to our sensibilities. Last week, we talked about Donald Trump's nominee to replace Kavanaugh on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, Naomi Rao, being attacked by the media for her support of allowing adults to make money taking part in dwarf tossing. Now, in Washington, Republican State Senator Mike Padden has new legislation that would effectively ban this form of entertainment at bars and clubs. According to him, it, and I quote, demeans and exploits those of small stature. If passed, Washington would become the third state to ban it. Padden said, "There's nothing funny about dwarf tossing. It ridicules and demeans people with dwarfism and causes others to think of them as objects of public amusement, even when participants are willing. Dwarf tossing is an offense to our sensibilities." Okay. However, he's not a dwarf. He's not taking part in the tossing. He is not a little person. There's an actor, there's a performer, little person by the name of Mighty Mike Murga. You ever run across him? He's got a problem with it. He says banning him from making a living is ridiculous. Oh, and by the way, let me preface all of this by saying, in no way, shape, or form am I presuming to speak for anyone with a different life experience than mine. You might have up close and personal experience of this. I do not. And I would never say, I understand what it's like to be something I'm not. Whether it's a nationality, an ethnicity, a color of skin, a height, any of the above. I would never be so bold and brazen and arrogant to speak for someone with a life experience that was different to mine. That would be a time where I would stop and listen as opposed to speak. Which is why I was interested in listening to what actor, performer, and little person Mighty Mike Murga had to say. And Mike Murga said banning him from making a living is absolutely ridiculous. He is a little person, a grown-ass little person. And you know what? He's trained. He's trained in Olympic-style wrestling. He's trained in weightlifting. He's a skilled individual. He's trained as a bodybuilder. And he's also trained in the circus arts. Went to circus school. And studied everything from acrobatics to fire breathing. And he takes part in dwarf tossing. He makes a living, part of his living, doing exactly this. And he calls it just another stunt. He said it was just another stunt, and then I learned to make a living at it. And I make hundreds of people happy watching it happen. See, one can disagree with another's choices, but I want to talk to you a little bit about dignity. Dignity is the right to make that choice. Dignity and individual liberty and freedom is the right to make a choice without the government making it for you. Like I said, my friend loved being a waiter, thought I would love being a waiter. He got real, genuine joy out of being a waiter. He said it over and over again. People are hungry. I bring them food. They're happy. They give me money. It's a beautiful thing. I found it to be demeaning. I found it to be diminishing. I didn't enjoy it. We had a very, very different experience of it. He decided it was for him. I decided it was absolutely not for me. I've seen trash collectors, nursing home janitors, sewage system workers, people who wade through another person's feces conduct their job with dignity and pride and passion. They get from it something that I never would But is it my right to decide what they do and where they get their sense of passion and pride and meaning and purpose? No, it's not. It's not the government's either, provided they're acting within the boundaries of the law. Meanwhile, I know so many senior executives. I know corporate lawyers. I know people that work in the world of high finance. I know people that work in entertainment and record labels, these glitzy, glamorous, highfalutin, high-paid jobs. They are miserable. They are denigrated. Some of them, there's some people that I know, some record reps, people whose job it is to get bands' records played on the radio, that I know who have suffered from PTSD because of the stresses of their job. They can't find a single thing to love about what they do. You can get a job in America allowing mosquitoes and snakes to bite you for research. You can get a job in America sniffing armpits to test the effectiveness of deodorants. It can be your job in America to mop up bloody crime scenes and mop up porno theaters. There's a job in America where you as a human can taste pet food. What's your job? I eat pet food. There's a job in America where you can clean porta potties. Literally make your living dealing with other people's human waste. There's jobs in America that involve cleaning up roadkill. And there's people that do these things and they get something real and tangible that they love out of them. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that everybody that cleans sewers and porta potties and collects roadkill and tastes pet food for a living and cleans up bloody crime scenes and sniffs armpits to test the effectiveness of deodorant products is happy and fulfilled with their work. But there are people that get meaning and purpose and happiness out of these things. And is it for the government to say, no, it's demeaning to this person to taste pet food for a living? We won't allow that. No, it's not. Like our friend Mighty Mike Murga said, banning him from making a living is ridiculous. He's trained in the circus arts, everything from acrobatics to fire breathing, and the work he does is another stunt to him. Not only that, he makes a living at it, and he makes hundreds of people happy while they watch it happen. He gets money. He gets money to make other people happy, and he loves his job. Might be horribly demeaning to someone else. Pornography. I cannot remember who the comedian was, so forgive me for not quoting my source, but there was some incredibly insightful comedian that said it was ridiculous that an 18-year-old could have sex with 20 different guys on camera, but wasn't allowed to have a drink after the fact. If there's anyone that needed a drink, it was that person. Now, the government makes a decision that that's okay. If you're 18, you can do that. That's not demeaning. But this is, for some reason. Now, like I said, maybe there are people that think this is demeaning to them. Maybe they've got a real life experience of this. But what I find to be more demeaning on the surface of things is viewing a group like Little People as being so feeble and inferior that you have to appoint yourself as their white knight and thus ban adults from engaging in a practice they consent to do, all in the name of protecting them because they can't make up their own minds. They're incapable of deciding for themselves. You choosing for them what's right, that is where you cross a line, and that is what's demeaning.
Now, more AD on the radio.
So, in the time you and I have left, we will examine the events of today in our segment, My Witness News. And as it turns out, the NFL is in the news a lot at the moment. So before we get into all that, let's just pause and reflect upon the fact that Roman numerals in football are getting way the hell out of control.
What a time to be a Patriots fan, man. I'm telling you, you realize the Patriots have won Super Bowls XXXVI, XXXVIII, XXIX, XLIX, and LI. Does anybody else think that this Roman numeral isn't quite catching on? Right? After Super Bowl III, you lost me. I don't know what the hell's going on. You know how long it took me to memorize that? There's a reason no one else is using Roman numerals. They suck. It's a bad idea. You know where we should use, I got thinking about it. You know where we should use Roman numerals is on our passwords, on our bank accounts and stuff. Seriously, I don't think anybody could figure them out. You could literally put your date of birth on your password in a Roman numeral. Do you know what Justin, if I used a Roman numeral with my date of birth, would be if I used a Roman numeral? It'd be Justin XXIVILIXVIIXLIVIIXI. You make one of those lowercase, the Russians aren't hacking into that.
The great Justin McKinney makes a hilarious and valid point. All right, let's, this is kind of interesting. This just goes to show. There's always going to be people that say you can't, that you're not good enough, that you're not enough. There's always going to be people that say, maybe from a very educated place and perspective, that things aren't going to work out with you and the thing that you want to do. And, well, it's just another in a long line of great reminders that if you have your heart set on something, you can't let what other people say about it stop you from pursuing the things that are important to you. Case in point, yesterday was the 19th anniversary of the New England Patriots hiring Bill Belichick away from the New York Jets. And back then, there were some people that did not think much of that decision. Back then, there were some NFL experts claiming that the Patriots would, quote-unquote, regret the move. Yeah. There was a guy, and, on the 19th anniversary of the Patriots hiring Bill Belichick, I'm sure this guy isn't too thrilled with his article being reprinted left, right, and center the way it has been. But there was one piece by syndicated columnist Ian O'Connor. It's especially famous. He argued, quote, owner Bob Kraft's wildest gamble has nothing to do with ends and safeties and everything to do with the middle-aged mess he hired to coach them. Now, of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Whether you like him or not, and unless you are from the New England area, I don't know too many people that think of Bill Belichick all that fondly. But whether you like him or not, Belichick is objectively, in a data-driven sense, possibly, and a lot of people would say undoubtedly, the best NFL coach of all time. Immediately after taking over the Patriots, he drafted a guy called Tom Brady in the 6th round. 6th round. And together, they've been to 9 of the super terrific big games I don't think I'm allowed to mention by name on the radio and remain employed. 9 of those big games in 19 years. They've won 5. And, well, they could be making it 6 in the not-too-distant future. Belichick has 30 wins in the playoffs, 10 more than any other coach in history, and the Patriots haven't had a losing season since the year 2000, Bill's first year, and the year that 6th-round draft pick, Tom Brady, was the backup quarterback. Now, This poor guy, Ian O'Connor, the syndicated sports columnist that wrote this piece. He's living it down. He's doing an admirable job of accepting his mistakes. He admits that his prediction was the single worst of his career. And he now thinks that Belichick is legendary, which of course he is. He recently said, quote, "I think Belichick has surpassed Vince Lombardi as the best NFL coach of all time. It's just so much harder to maintain excellence now than it was in Lombardi's time." But here's what's interesting. O'Connor said he doesn't remember his take on the whole situation being all that unpopular back in the day. And you know what? If you look back at it, he's right. He's right. His is not the only article you can dredge up online, which looks at the whole Belichick situation that was brand new back then as being very dubious. A lot of people said it was a lousy hire. And I guess this is a point I'm trying to make. If you believe in yourself, if you believe in something that you're doing, if you believe in something that you're trying to do, look, you might succeed, you might not. But it is a guarantee that there will be people that tell you can't do it, that you're not good enough, that it's a lousy idea. There's so many people that will tell you, no, it can't be done. And you cannot listen to those folks. A report out of Cleveland said, quote, "His record in Cleveland as a fan base killer is legendary. In the early 90s, the Browns were the first team to hire Belichick as a head coach, and he had a very frosty relationship with the city." And ESPN's Ron Jaworski said, quote, "Belichick is one of the game's outstanding defensive coaches." Said he was an outstanding defensive coach, but as a head coach, he didn't prove much. I think there were other qualified coaches out there. Now, obviously, a lot of hot sports takes can be looked at with 20/20 vision in hindsight. But considering how loudly and definitively these, and I quote, experts and analysts, syndicated sports columnists, people that are paid for their take and their opinion, considering how loudly and definitively these experts and analysts shout their guarantees on ESPN and places like that, it's actually kind of fun to go back and hold their feet to the fire a little bit, since they rarely have to own up to their own misses. And that is fun. Little "I told you so," or little "nah, I was right and you were wrong," or maybe just "you were wrong." But I think the real lesson in it for all of us, well, it's a reminder that you can be more. You can do more. You can achieve more. You are capable of so much more than people around you say you are. So there you have it. What is today? Monday? Motivation Monday? Yeah, let's call that Motivation Monday. Let's call that our reminder for the day. That no matter what people say you are capable of, you are capable of so much more. We're out of time. But you know what? I think that's a good place to leave it. Thank you so much for hanging. Thank you for being a part of my radio family. As always, this time that you and I spend together, it really is the best part of my day every single day. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it all over again. Have yourself an awesome night.